ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank the Dubai Judicial Institute for the invitation. I'd like to thank all of the hosts and the sponsors for putting this excellent event together, and I'd like to thank all of you for being here and sharing in this. As was just mentioned, my name is Jacob Turner. I am a lawyer based in London, and I am also the author of a book called Robot Rules: Regulating Artificial Intelligence, which was published in November last year. The book looks at why AI is unique legally and ethically, what problems it could cause, and how we can solve them. It aims to present a roadmap for regulators and for businesses in dealing with the new challenges which are raised by artificial intelligence. My presentation today, or my first presentation today, is going to cover 4 topics, moving on from Mr. Moutawi's excellent presentation just now on an introduction to artificial intelligence. I'm going to be looking at how artificial intelligence is addressed under legal systems, and in particular, how artificial intelligence is defined. The first part of my presentation will look at different approaches to defining an AI, and I think there are 2 main ones. I will then look at AI definitions adopted to date by several major jurisdictions. Next, I will look at why AI is unique as a legal and ethical phenomenon. And finally, I will explain why AI is different from other entities which people sometimes say can be compared to artificial intelligence. So what is AI? When you mention the words artificial intelligence or robots to most people, the types of images they will have in their heads are those up on the screen. They are images from science fiction. They are types of AI which closely resemble human intelligence. We can see R2-D2 and C-3PO from Star Wars, the Terminator from the popular film. And in terms of robots, people may well think of the kinds of robots, the kinds of machinery that we see in factories. So in the bottom corner of the screen, we have machinery from a car factory. Now, I'm sorry to disappoint people in here, but I will not be talking about any of the types of artificial intelligence which are up on the screen. We do, however, have artificial intelligence in the world today all around us, as Mr. Moutawi showed in excellent detail. Before I come on to talking about definitions of AI, I think it's important to ask first, why define AI at all? What is the point of having a definition? The US Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart once said, when talking about obscene publications, "I can't define it, but I know it when I see it." Is that good enough when it comes to artificial intelligence? Can we say we don't need to define AI because it is obvious when AI is around us? I don't think so. Professor Edwin Borin, who was a professor of psychology, when trying to describe intelligence, said, "Intelligence is what is measured by intelligence tests." Now that sounds like he was making a joke. It sounds like he's just repeating himself. Intelligence is intelligence. But actually, I think there was some real insight in Professor Boring's approach. The difficult part of defining artificial intelligence is not artificial. artificial as a concept is easy to understand. It means man-made. It means not occurring in nature. The difficult part is intelligence. So what is intelligence? Professor Boring was correct in saying that intelligence is what is measured by intelligence tests, because the definition of intelligence depends on why you are asking. We need to understand the purpose of the question in order to be able to get to a meaningful answer. What I mean to say by this is that there is no single definition of intelligence. It depends what our purpose is. And I'll come on to talking about what our purpose is for the relevance of this conference in a few slides' time. Now, the problems with just saying, as the US Supreme Court Justice did, that we know it when we see it, are as follows. Firstly, if we don't have a shared definition of AI, then that makes discussing it impossible. One person might come along and say, AI is this, AI is that, and another person might say, no, 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 you are completely wrong. AI is something else. And in fact, they won't be talking about the same definition of artificial intelligence at all. So until we have a shared concept of what we're talking about, we cannot have a meaningful exchange on the topic. The next key problem for lawyers, for policymakers, of not defining AI is that it leads to great uncertainty. If subjects, if the entities being regulated don't understand what the regulations apply to, then how can they possibly adhere to them? How can standards be upheld by the government and the judiciary if there is uncertainty as to how or when they apply? It would be no good if a business could simply say, what we are doing is not AI, therefore it doesn't need to be regulated. So we have to have a shared definition. And I'm going to look at now a good type of shared definition. But first I'm going to look at some types which are perhaps less useful. So the first type of definition I'm going to look at is a human-centric definition of artificial intelligence. And this is the type which has been adopted by the UK government. The UK government has said AI constitutes technologies with the ability to perform tasks that would otherwise require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, and language translation. So what they're saying is that to have artificial intelligence, you need to replicate us. You need to replicate humans. And if it's not replicating humans, it's not artificial intelligence. Now, as Mr. Mutawi was saying, this is really how people started off by thinking about artificial intelligence, by relating it back to human intelligence. A very famous old test for artificial intelligence, which was really very much in common usage until the last 3 or 4 years, with great leaps forward in artificial intelligence, is known as the Turing test. It's named the Turing test after Alan Turing, who, as many of you will, I'm sure, know, was a famous British scientist, British computer scientist and mathematician, who developed not just the first computers, but also the first artificial intelligence systems as early as the 1940s and the 1950s. And in a very influential paper from 1950, he proposed a test to determine when a system constitutes artificial intelligence. His test is on the far side of the screen. There is a human invigilator below the line. The human invigilator asks a series of questions to, on another side of a screen, so the human invigilator cannot see them, a human and a computer. The human is a man, who is pretending to be a woman for the purpose of the questions, and the computer is also pretending to be a woman for the purpose of the questions. Alan Turing said that if the computer can fool the invigilator into thinking that the computer is not just a human, but is also the human woman, and that the real human is not a human and is not the real human woman, then the computer has passed the Turing test. Then, in Turing's view, the computer is intelligent. There is a more modern version of the Turing test, and in fact there is a competition which is run every year called the Nobel Prize, where language reasoning systems, natural language processing systems, things like Siri, which are able to listen to your commands, to listen to your questions, or to read typed questions and then respond, those are, in the modern version of the Turing test, pitted against a human invigilator. And there is also another human who is speaking to the human invigilator. And the human invigilator, like in the original test, cannot see who they are talking to. There is no question in the modern test of pretending to be somebody of the opposite sex. So that was seen as being too complicated. That was removed from the modern test. And the modern test just asks, if you have a 5-minute conversation with somebody who you cannot see, the question is that person or is that thing that you are speaking to a human or a computer? And if the computer can make the invigilator think that the computer is a human, then it has passed the test. Now, in 2014, a computer did just pass this test. But does that mean that we have true artificial intelligence? I don't think so. The computer that passed the test was very limited. For a start, it was pretending to be a child, so the answers were not so sophisticated. It was pretending to be somebody from a different country, from the Ukraine, in fact, so English was not their first language. So you can see that the programmers were really trying to set things up to make it as easy as possible for the computer to succeed, because the human invigilators would understand that somebody who is a child and somebody who does not speak English as their first language maybe will make some mistakes. So lots of people have criticized the idea that this test has been passed and said, actually, it hasn't really been passed. There are a number of problems with using a human-centric definition of artificial intelligence. Firstly, the tests reward mimicking humans and sometimes mimicking human mistakes. Now, mimicking human mistakes is not a hallmark of intelligence. A mistake is something which is unintelligent, so that's one bad thing about it. Secondly, modern psychology suggests that many of the things that we do, many of our instant reactions, which are very helpful, are not consciously thought of by us as intelligent. And so it's difficult then to try to replicate those in a machine. Also, if we just say that intelligence is replicating what humans do, we will have an over-inclusive definition of the technology. For example, humans can undertake calculations. We can add things up, we can subtract, we can divide, and so on. But a calculator that we've had since the 1950s or 60s, that can also do all of those human tasks. And in fact, a calculator can do it better than humans can. But we don't think of a calculator really as being artificial intelligence, because a calculator uses fairly simplistic levels of reasoning, nothing like the kind of things that Mr. Mutawi was speaking about earlier. So human-centric definitions are not so good for that reason also. And then finally, I'd like to make the point on this that we need to be humble here. We need to take the view that humans are not necessarily the pinnacle of intelligence. There may well be beings which are more intelligent than humans are, or intelligent in different ways. And so if we simply seek to replicate humans, we are limiting what artificial intelligence can do. And this is shown on the slide up on the screen. So human-centric AI on the far side, which, as I've said, I don't think is a good way of looking at it, has human intelligence as being the all-inclusive field of intelligence, and then only within that there is AI. AI might be able to replicate some things that humans do, but certainly not all of them. That's the human-centric model. I think a better model is the one closer to me on the screen. That's where you have intelligence as a general concept which can encompass many different things. There is the green, natural intelligence, for example, the intelligence that animals have. And animals have some types of instincts, which you might call intelligence, that go well beyond what humans can do. For example, many birds know when there is about to be an earthquake. They fly away. Now, that's not something that humans can do. We don't have that ability. So perhaps that's a type of intelligence which we do not possess as humans. So within natural intelligence, human intelligence is just one type. And then you have artificial intelligence, which sits partly overlapping with human intelligence, but actually, and as I'll show with some examples in a few minutes' time, actually artificial intelligence can go beyond what humans do. So for that reason, using human intelligence as the definition for AI is, in my view, not a good way of dealing with it. The next big group of definitions, so I'm moving on now from human-centric definitions, and these are definitions which have been adopted more recently in the last 5-10 years, since the time of what's known as the AI spring. So in round about 2010, 2011, there was a major leap forward in AI technology, as Mr. Mutawi was alluding to. And as a result of that leap forward, our understanding of AI has improved a great deal, and people have started to realize that things like the Turing test are no longer fit for purpose. So they've adopted new definitions, rationalist definitions. There's one by a prominent computer scientist, Niels Nilsson. He says, "Intelligence is that quality that enables an entity to function appropriately and with foresight in its environment." So you can see that there's no link here to humans at all. It's just saying that AI is something which knows what to do and when to do it. There is an even simpler way of putting this, which is used by Stuart Russell, one of the world's leading computer scientists. He said, "Intelligence is doing the right thing at the right time." Intelligence is doing the right thing at the right time. Now, these things sound sensible. These definitions sound useful. They don't have the problems that human-centric definitions have. However, there are also some problems with rationalist definitions of artificial intelligence. They're not perfect. Firstly, I said AI is doing the right thing at the right time. But what is the right thing? How do we know? Many tasks, many goals have more than one way of achieving them, and often we improve our ways of achieving our goals over time. So how can we know what the right thing is? And in fact, humans don't always do the right thing. yet we consider ourselves intelligent. So we can't have a definition of intelligence that means humans don't meet it, or at least it's difficult to do that. The next issue with rationalist definitions are that even though they don't link directly to human capabilities, nonetheless, there is an implicit link to the way that humans think about things, because we are assuming that AI knows what it wants to do. You cannot do the right thing if you don't know what it is you are doing in the first place. So we are assuming some kind of a personality, some kind of volition for artificial intelligence, some kind of a will that it may not actually have. This is important when we come to think about the types of technologies which AI covers, and Mr. Mutawi alluded to some of these earlier. Some types of artificial intelligence are what's known as supervised. That is to say that a human will tell the AI what to do and whether it's doing the right thing. You are giving the AI feedback, much like you would give a dog feedback, or a horse or a hawk feedback when you are training it. You reward the AI system if it does the right thing, and you say you get no reward if the AI system does the wrong thing. Those are supervised systems. However, there is an important branch of AI called unsupervised learning, where you simply give the AI a set of data and you ask it to recognize clusters. You ask it to recognize commonalities in that data. It's difficult to apply rationalist goals to unsupervised learning because it's very hard to say what is the right thing when you're just spotting patterns within a set of data. And finally, successful behavior is not the same as intelligence. If AI is doing the right thing at the right time, and you have a watch on your hand, and you look at the watch, and it says 10:30 a.m., and it is, in fact, 10:30 a.m., then your watch is doing the right thing at the right time. But your watch is not intelligent, so perhaps this is also over-inclusive. I'm now going to look at definitions of artificial intelligence adopted to date by certain countries, which are amongst Dubai leading in the AI regulatory processes. So, in the US, they recently published a paper on US leadership in artificial intelligence. This is from August this year. The US said that for the purposes of their regulatory plan, AI technologies and systems are considered to comprise software and/or hardware that can learn to solve complex problems, make predictions, or undertake tasks that require human-like sensing, such as vision, speech, and touch, perception, cognition, planning, learning, communication, or physical action. So the US have listed many, many different capabilities of artificial intelligence here, and they've more, I think, gone towards a human-centric definition, in as much as they've spoken about requiring human-like characteristics. That's the underlined part. Although some parts of their definition are quite good in that they also encompass rationalist parts, where they talk about solving complex problems. So the idea of solving problems is perhaps doing the right thing at the right time with a given problem. That's how you come to a solution. So the US is sitting between the two types of definitions I've spoken about. The UK definition I've already mentioned is a very human-centric definition. Singapore, like Dubai, a major hub for regional economic forces and also regional regulatory forces, they, again, like Dubai, have been putting major investment into regulating AI and growing their homegrown AI ecosystem. They talk about AI as being a set of technologies that seek to simulate human traits, such as knowledge, reasoning, problem-solving, perception, learning, and planning. And then they go on to talk about the way in which AI can do this by using models of the world in order to arrive at outcomes. So again, we can see that Singapore, at least at the moment, are using quite a human-centric definition of artificial intelligence. I'm going to talk about a new definition for AI. So I've shown you some of the weaknesses, some of the problems with definitions that have been adopted by other jurisdictions, and now I'm going to propose a definition which I think perhaps is a little better in these terms. So I mentioned earlier, there's no single definition of artificial intelligence. It depends what your purpose is. Question: what is our purpose? Our purpose here as regulators, judges, legislators is to set rules, to regulate decision-making. So the second question is then, what is our definition? In my view, AI is the ability of a non-natural entity, that's to say a man-made entity, that's the artificial part, to make choices by an evaluative process. Now, a simpler way of talking about an evaluative process, because I can see that that is a difficult concept to understand or to explain, is to say that AI is a system which is capable of autonomous decision-making. Autonomous decision-making. That is the essence of what is novel and what is legally and ethically challenging about artificial intelligence. It is its ability to take decisions without being explicitly programmed how to take those decisions by humans. There are two key distinctions which illustrate this new definition of AI. First, and this is the most important one, between automation on the one hand and autonomy on the other. Automation on the far side of the screen. This is what all of traditional computer programs have done to date. There is a series of logical questions in traditional computer programs. They say, if X, then Y. If Y, then Z. It is a tree of knowledge, but each of the answers to each of the questions are programmed in by a human in advance. There is no discretion on the part of the artificial intelligence in an automated system. It is simply following instructions. Sometimes when people talk about AI, they are speaking about these automated systems. But for me, that is not AI, because if you know what the answer is in advance, if you know how the system is going to get to that answer, then there is no intelligence in that system. All of the intelligence is the intelligence of the human who designed that system. Let's contrast that with autonomy. Autonomy, for me, is artificial intelligence. There are a number of different technologies which can make up artificial intelligence, as we heard from Mr. Mutawi earlier. One of the main ones at the moment is called machine learning. It involves neural nets. This is a simplified version of the way that we think the human brain functions. You can see from the diagram on the screen that the dots are connected by many different lines. Each of the lines represents an option for the system to take. There is no set route that the system has to take when it's reasoning. It's able to build up its own links between concepts. That's the way that we think as humans. So the idea of an autonomous system is that we don't know exactly how it's going to go from point A on the far side to point B, the answer. And that's the way that humans work as well. Which is not to say that humans are the only definition of intelligence, but this replicates a bit more the way that independent thinking works. The second distinction, which is important for defining AI, is between narrow and general artificial intelligence. I said on the very first slide, I wasn't going to be talking about the type of AI we see in science fiction. And here is why. I'm not saying that this type of AI, the humanoid one that is conscious, that has feelings, that in many ways looks and sounds like a human, that is AI. But the thing is, we don't have it yet, and it is misleading to assume that we will only have AI when we have this type of human-level reasoning. When you hear people say, we don't really have AI, and perhaps we will never have true AI, what they're talking about is general artificial intelligence. However, what we do have, and what does constitute autonomous behavior in an artificial system at the moment, is narrow AI. Narrow AI is a type of technology which can do one thing, or perhaps a small number of things, but it can do them very well. It can do them in a very sophisticated manner. So the example up on the screen is image recognition AI. But there are many other types. There is a type of AI to recognize language. There are types of AI to make financial predictions. We've heard about the many different applications of different types of narrow AI previously. And the key thing to remember is that narrow AI is just as much artificial intelligence as general AI. It's just not as sophisticated yet. So with that definition given, we can now start to divide between some of the different terminology that we often hear about when people talk about AI, and we can fit it in to our definition. So artificial intelligence is shown by the largest circle. That's the all-inclusive group. Within that, there is machine learning. Machine learning, as I mentioned, has really grown since 2010, owing to a few things. The idea of machine learning, the concept of a machine which can teach itself to do tasks, has been around since really the beginning of AI, the 1960s, 1970s. The problem was, we didn't have the data, we didn't have the algorithms, and we didn't have the processing power to be able to achieve that. And in around 2010, we had big data, sourced mainly from the internet. There's much more data recorded in the world now than there ever has been, and it's increasing on a near exponential basis. We also started to use a new type of processor, a new type of hardware to undertake these many, many calculations very quickly. And scientists developed new algorithms. So machine learning really took off. And machine learning is not the only type of AI. It's very important to make this clear, that machine learning is just one technology which constitutes AI. But machine learning is the most popular technology right now. So some people will say at the moment, AI is just machine learning. That's not quite true. AI can be many other things, but machine learning is just the best that we have at the moment. Within machine learning, there is another subset. This is called deep learning. That's a particular technology which is a way of using machine learning on multiple different levels to arrive at very sophisticated conclusions. Let's have a look at the way a deep learning neural net works to try and put some of these quite complex things into reality. So you start off with an image. We've got an image of a turtle, and that is input. So imagine there's a camera looking at that image and feeding it into a computer. Within a deep net, and the reason why it's called a deep net is if you imagine when you're fishing with a boat and you have a trawler, if you have a deep net, it's very long, it's very wide, it has many different levels. That's the idea of a deep net. In each level of abstraction, the computer is able to understand a more complex part of the concept. So you start off by just looking at the pixels, by just looking at what is light, what is dark. Then you start to identify the edges, the contours of the shape. From there, you look at the combinations of edges. So here is one fin, here is another fin, the head is here. So the computer is starting to put these things together, to add them up. Next, you identify features. You say, well, this pointy thing, this is a fin. This round thing, this is a head. This oval thing, this is a shell. So you identify the features. And finally, you identify the combinations of features, and your output is, the computer says, I recognize this. This is a turtle. So that's how a deep learning neural net works. It's a combination of many different layers of functioning. And as I've said, that's a bit like how we think our brain works. So here is a simple glossary of concepts which people often talk about when they use the word AI. So often when you read in the press, or even in some press releases by governments and by organizations, they use lots of these words, and I've grouped them into things which are definitely AI. So we have machine learning, I've mentioned, neural networks, deep learning, and there are other categories, other forms of machine learning. Reinforcement learning is another one. I won't go into the details. These are examples of AI. Another way of creating AI, which is not currently very advanced at the moment, is the idea of whole brain emulation. The idea that you can build a completely artificial brain, a brain in a vat, as it were, perhaps using biological techniques, perhaps by cloning a human or an animal brain. Now, we're not very good at this yet, because the brains are largely unknown to us, but that's another type of potential technology for artificial intelligence. Some things are sometimes called AI, but may or may not be. So people will sometimes say, oh, well, AI is just statistics. AI is just computer models, computer programs. Now, that is partly true, at least for machine learning, but it's true in the same way as saying that the human mind is just electrical signals. It is true, literally, that as far as we know, the human mind is made up of electrical signals between different parts of the brain, but it doesn't really capture what it is to have a mind. And in the same way, if you just talk about statistical models, that doesn't capture what AI is actually doing. And there will be some statistical models which are AI, and others which are not. And finally, things that are not AI. So logic-based systems, expert systems, these are all examples of what I referred to earlier as automated technology rather than autonomous technology. The key thing for AI, to reiterate, is that it has the ability to make its own decisions. And things which are not AI don't have the ability to make their own decisions. A human is making all the decisions. I'm now going to talk about why artificial intelligence is unique from a legal perspective. Mr. Mutawi earlier mentioned the AlphaGo game, or the AlphaGo program, beating a human champion, Lee Sedol, at the ancient Asian board game of Go, which is many, many times more complicated than chess. Lots of people said that an AI system would never beat a human at Go, still less a human champion. They said it's just too complicated. But in 2016, a British company, which is now owned by Google, or rather owned by Alphabet, Google's parent company, called DeepMind, released a system called AlphaGo, which then played against one of the human world champions, a South Korean called Lee Sedol. And it's already been mentioned that it beat him in a best-of-5 series. It beat him by 4 games to 1. But what was interesting was not the fact that the AI beat the human champion, because, as we've heard already, AI has been beating human champions at board games for many years. What was interesting was the way in which AlphaGo defeated Lee Sedol. And there was one moment in the best-of-5 series of games which really illustrated AI's novelty, which illustrated AI's autonomy. That was Game 2, Move 37, and it's up here on the screen. In this move, AlphaGo did something which shocked everybody watching. They couldn't understand why AlphaGo had taken this move. The programmers who had designed the program were baffled. The Go experts watching the game thought it was a mistake. Lee Sedol, the world champion who was playing, knew different. You can see his chair is empty. He stood up and left the room when this move was taken. And the reason is, this move was not a mistake. It turned out, several hours later, that that was the winning move. AlphaGo had thought of a new way of playing the game of Go, which no human in the history of the game being played had ever discovered. AlphaGo had done something which no human was capable of doing in thinking of a new way of playing the game. So this is an example of the novelty of AI, of the uniqueness of AI, of the fact that AI is different from all other technologies which we've seen before. Now, the next year, DeepMind, the company, went one step further. They released a new version of AlphaGo called AlphaGo Zero. Here is the difference. AlphaGo learned how to play the game by watching many, many human games. It looked at how human champions played. It recorded, it learned from humans. AlphaGo Zero didn't learn from humans. AlphaGo Zero taught itself from nothing. AlphaGo Zero was told the rules of the game, and it simply played against itself over a series of 3, 4, 5 days, and after 5 days, it was better than any human. After 7 days, it was better than AlphaGo, the system which had previously beaten the human champion. So we can see now, we can see in this example, the power of AI, not just to do incredibly impressive things, but to do these impressive things without much human input. So this, again, is an example of the autonomy of AI, of true AI, the ability of AI to do things which we haven't told it to do. So this brings me on to the unique features of artificial intelligence and how it interacts with existing legal systems. Existing legal systems all look at human decision-making. They tell humans what we can and can't do. They tell us what the consequences will be if we do or don't do these things. They rely on what's known as human agency. That's to say, the ability to undertake actions in a given system and to understand the consequences of those actions. There's no point in having a legal system if humans don't have free will, if humans don't have the ability to understand the legal system and to say, I'm going to do this, and if I do this, I will achieve this goal, or I won't do this because if I do it, I will be sent to prison. So they rely on human agency, they rely on human decision-making. AI is novel because for the first time, we have something which is not human, but which is able to engage in complex, independent decision-making. And I'll give an example of the increasing independence of AI from humans. So many people, particularly computer scientists, might say that right now, AI is very reliant on humans telling it what to do, on human programmers. You can't just give an AI system a problem and leave it to itself, particularly if it's a difficult problem. There needs to be humans having input at every stage. Now, that has been true up until fairly recently, but technology is improving all the time. So, to give an example, we can contrast machine learning with deep learning, machine learning being on the top. With machine learning, simplified types of machine learning, you need to have a human which identifies certain features of a particular input that you want the computer to recognize. So if you want the computer to recognize a car, you have to extract the key features of the car. You have to say it has wheels, it has a chassis, it has a windscreen, it has doors. That makes a car. With deep learning, you can take the human to an extent out of the picture. Because deep learning, as I showed earlier with the picture of the turtle, deep learning will look at 10 different pictures which feature cars, and from that, it will be able to identify cars. You don't need the human to be in the loop. So this is an example of how computers are getting increasingly good at not having human input. They are becoming increasingly independent from us. Finally, I'm going to look at distinguishing artificial intelligence from other entities. Because many people will say that AI is not so different from certain things which we already have in the world at the moment. And we have lots of laws in the world at the moment. We have laws for different types of entities. So why can't we just apply the laws for those existing entities to artificial intelligence? Why can't we just do that? My suggestion is that AI actually is different from these various other entities. And I'm going to go now into a little bit of detail as to why that's the case. So firstly, animals. Why can't we just apply the law of animals to artificial intelligence? As to similarities, animals can sense their environment and react. A horse will run out of the way or will jump over an obstacle if it sees it, so you don't need to tell it to do that. And animals have a degree of autonomy. A dog might play with something, might jump on something without you telling it to do, so it's taking independent decisions. However, animals have limitations. There is a certain level of sophistication which animals will never meet. A lion, if it escapes from the zoo, might bite somebody, but it will not commit complex securities fraud. However, an artificial intelligence system might well undertake a complex fraud. So there is no limit to the advancement of AI, whereas we have a limit to the advancement of animals. Also, animals, perhaps they can understand some reward, some punishment, but an animal does not understand a series of laws. They can't really operate within a rule-based system, and AI does have that ability to operate within a complex rule-based system. So that level of sophistication takes it above animals. It makes it difficult, in my view, to apply the law of animals to the law of artificial intelligence, because really AI resembles much more the way that humans function than animals do. What about children? Some people say we should treat AI in the same way that we treat a child. Children have limited legal capacity. Often, for example, a young child cannot commit a crime. A young child cannot necessarily always enter into a contract, so there are limitations on what they can do. Usually, a responsible adult will be held liable for what a child has done. So why don't we say you must have a responsible adult for artificial intelligence? Now, this is one way of doing it, and in fact, many jurisdictions are saying that for every AI system, there must be a responsible person. In Germany, the law on autonomous vehicles says there must be a responsible human being supervising the autonomous car. There must be someone responsible. So we can, to an extent, treat AI like the way we treat children. And in the short term, that's quite a good way of doing it. However, children reach a certain age above which we say they have independence. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 12. We call it the age of reason. We call it the age of responsibility. So, for example, if you have a murderer, you don't hold the parents responsible if the murderer is 20. You hold the 20-year-old person responsible because they have their own independent responsibility. And what I would question in the future is whether we will have an AI which has a sufficient level of independence and advancement that maybe we should give it its own responsibility. And I will come back to this in my second presentation later this afternoon. Finally, people say, well, we have other types of phenomena which can act unpredictably, perhaps a poisonous gas or a chemical. If a chemical escapes from a factory, we don't know where the chemical will go. It might blow one way in the wind, it might blow another way. Why don't we treat AI like that? My answer is that chemicals, even more so than animals, cannot respond to rule-based systems. You cannot say to a gas, you must not go here. Doesn't work. Whereas if you say that to an AI system, the AI system will be able to respond, will be able to follow a set of parameters and guidelines. So, to conclude, all previous systems of laws and all previous systems of ethics look at human decision-making. They tell us what we can and can't do. But that is challenged by artificial intelligence, because AI has autonomy. This leads, in my view, to novel problems in three main areas for lawyers and legislators. These are responsibility, so who is liable if AI causes harm or creates something beneficial? Rights, should AI ever be given legal rights? And finally, ethics, how should AI take decisions? And are there any decisions that AI should not take? I look forward to exploring these with you and with the other learned speakers over the next few sessions. Thank you very much, and if there is time for questions, then I'm happy to take some, or to move on if not. Thank you.